On Wednesday morning at 7:23 a.m., Barbara Mitchell made a $4.7 million mistake that would send her to federal prison for 15 years. And it all started with a wheelchair ramp she decided to destroy. The sound of power tools cutting through metal echoed through Lakeside Gardens like a declaration of war. The screech of the blade against steel was the moment Barbara transformed from HOA president to federal criminal. Because while I was receiving treatment at the VA hospital for service-related injuries, this suburban dictator decided my son's wheelchair ramp was architecturally unsightly and needed to be removed immediately. What? Didn't she know? That ramp was federally protected medical equipment for my disabled son. I'm a decorated Army Ranger who took 3 bullets saving my squad in Afghanistan. And I'm the type of veteran who doesn't surrender when bullies attack my family. What would you do if an apartment manager tried to remove disability equipment from your home? Drop a flag emoji in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. My name is Marcus Mac Thompson, and 6 months ago I thought moving to Lakeside Gardens would provide my son with a safe and accessible home. But I was completely wrong. Lakeside Gardens. A perfect suburban nightmare. Every house painted the same beige tone, every lawn maintained 2 exact specifications, and the chlorine smell from the community pools can't hide the stench of discrimination. HOA fees, $250 monthly for community standards. Paying Barbara Mitchell to terrorize disabled families. I'm a retired Army Ranger, medically discharged after coming under enemy fire during a rescue operation in Kandahar. 3 bullets, 1 through my left shoulder, 2 through my leg. I spent 14 months recovering at Walter Reed. But the real battle began when I came home to my son Dylan Thompson. 10 years old, cerebral palsy from birth, full-time wheelchair user, a smart kid with a smile that could light up the darkest room. His mother couldn't handle caring for a disabled child. She left when Dylan was 2. Since then, it's just been my son and me. Home renovation cost $87,000. Wheelchair ramps, widened doors, a compliant bathroom, accessible shower, lowered counters, every modification approved by county building permits, supervised by licensed contractors, and fully compliant with federal requirements under the Americans with Disabilities Act. Barbara Mitchell made her entrance 2 weeks after we moved in. Designer sunglasses, expensive jewelry, a thick clipboard with HOA management regulations written on it. Mr. Thompson, we need to discuss your unauthorized structural modifications. These ramps violate our architectural consistency standards. I showed her the permits, ADA, compliance, documentation, and medical necessity letters from Dylan's doctors. Ma'am, these modifications are federally protected. The Fair Housing Act and ADA supersede HOA covenants for disability accommodations. Barbara's smile was colder than Kandahar winters. Mr. Thompson, federal laws don't override private community standards. You'll need to submit modification requests to the Architectural Review Board. Until approved, these structures are subject to fines. Violations. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My son is in a wheelchair. These ramps aren't optional. They're medical equipment. Then perhaps, Barbara said with calculated cruelty, you should have chosen a community more suited to your family's special needs. Lakeside Gardens maintains certain aesthetic standards. The first violation notice arrived 3 days later via certified mail. Initial fine of $5,000 for unauthorized exterior modifications, followed by daily penalties of $500 until structures are removed or properly approved. My neighbor and Dylan's physical therapist, Sarah Chun, warned me about Barbara's history. Mac, she's targeted every disabled family in this neighborhood. The Williams family had a blind daughter. Barbara cited them for guide dog violations. The Martinez family with an autistic son had noise complaints during therapy sessions. Every family eventually left. She's forcibly evicting disabled families. The implications were clear and federally illegal. Systematically, Sarah confirmed. She calls it preserving community character. It's actually disability discrimination. But most families can't afford the legal battle, so they leave. I contacted a disability rights attorney, Jennifer Walsh, was an expert in Fair Housing Act violations. After reviewing my documents, she responded immediately. Mac, Barbara is violating multiple federal laws. The Fair Housing Act specifically prohibits discrimination against individuals with disabilities and requires reasonable accommodations. So I can fight this? You can destroy this, Jennifer said with professional certainty. Federal disability law completely supersedes HOA authority. But I must warn you, fighting Barbara Mitchell means war. She has money, political connections, and a reputation for destroying families who challenge her. Ma'am, I fought real wars in Afghanistan. A suburban HOA president doesn't scare me. But what I didn't know was that Barbara was planning a coordinated campaign to force us out, and her next move would immediately endanger Dylan's life. The Architectural Review Board hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. Barbara controlled the 5-member board, carefully selected allies. The meeting was held at the community center, packed with neighbors curious about the conflict. I came with Dylan, Sarah, and attorney Jennifer Walsh. Dylan was nervous. Crowds made him anxious, but he insisted on attending. Dad, if they're making decisions about our home, I should be there. It's my home, too. Barbara opened the meeting with her characteristic authority. We're here to address unauthorized structural modifications at 847 Lakeside Drive. Mr. Oh, Flaro. Mr. Thompson installed exterior ramps without board approval, violating architectural standards. Jennifer immediately stood up. Madam Chair, before this board proceeds, I need to clarify federal law. The Fair Housing Act and Americans with Disabilities Act prohibit HOA management from restricting disability-related modifications. My client's ramps are federally protected. Reasonable accommodations. Barbara's expression didn't change. Senora Walsh, we're not debating disability rights. We're addressing a steady compliance. The ramps can stay if designed to community standards. What specific design changes are required? I asked directly. Barbara consulted her clipboard. Ramps must be painted to match the house color, screened from street view with approved landscaping, and modified to reduce visibility from neighboring properties. Those conditions would cost $30,000, Jennifer interjected, and serve no functional purpose except hiding disability equipment from view. This is discrimination. This is aesthetic compliance, Barbara countered. All exterior modifications must meet these standards. We apply the same rules to everyone. You don't apply ramp requirements to everyone, Jennifer responded. Only 2 families with disabled children. That's the definition of disability discrimination under federal law. Board members exchanged uncomfortable glances. They clearly weren't expecting federal legal challenges. Barbara maintained her composure. This board will deliberate and provide a written decision within 30 days. As the meeting concluded, Dylan wheeled toward Barbara. Excuse-me, ma'am. Why don't you like my ramps? Barbara looked at my 10-year-old son, and I noticed a shift in her expression. Young man, this isn't personal. We have community standards everyone must follow. But I can't walk, Dylan said with childlike honesty. The ramps help me get into my house. If you take them away, I'll be stuck outside. Don't you want me to be able to go home? Barbara seemed almost human for a moment. Then the mask returned. Your father should have considered these issues before moving here. This community wasn't designed for wheelchairs. Then maybe, Dylan said quietly, your community could become a better place. The comment clearly upset Barbara. She turned away without responding, but I caught something in her face. Shame, anger, defensive justification. Whatever it was, she immediately suppressed it. The written decision came exactly 30 days later. Modification request denied. Structures must be removed within 14 days or face penalties up to $50,000 and possible foreclosure proceedings. They're threatening foreclosure. I showed Jennifer the letter in disbelief. Over wheelchair ramps. They're escalating to force you out, Jennifer explained. Classic intimidation tactic. But here's what they don't know. Threatening foreclosure on federally protected disability equipment automatically becomes a federal case. Barbara just gave us everything we need. What do? We file for injunctive relief and sue for civil rights violations in federal court. Jennifer sighed. The Department of Justice will likely join as a This case could set nationwide precedent on disability discrimination in homeowners associations. But Barbara wasn't waiting for the courts. 3 days after the denial letter, I woke to the sound of construction equipment in my driveway. Through the window, I saw a crew with power tools and a truck. HOA security officer Frank Davis was supervising as workers began dismantling Dylan's wheelchair ramps. What the hell is going on? I burst outside in my Army PT shorts and t-shirt. Stop! You can't remove those ramps! Frank held up a work order signed by Barbara. HOA emergency enforcement action. These structures were denied by the Architectural Board and must be removed immediately. This is medical equipment for my disabled son. Primera shouted, "You're violating federal disability law." Frank replied with bureaucratic indifference, "We're enforcing community management regulations. You were given 14 days' notice. Your time is up." Dylan appeared in the doorway, trapped among the partially demolished ramps inside the house. His wheelchair couldn't navigate through the construction debris and torn-up boards. "Dad, I can't get out." Seeing my son trapped in his own home because of Barbara's persecution ignited something primal. I stepped between the workers and what remained of the ramp structure. "No one is touching another piece of this ramp. I don't care what paperwork you have." Frank made a fatal mistake. He reached for his radio. "We have a homeowner refusing to comply with enforcement, requesting police assistance for trespassing and obstruction." Trespassing on my own property? But Frank was already spinning the story. When police arrived 15 minutes later, he portrayed me as an aggressive veteran, refusing to comply with lawful HOA enforcement. The responding officers, unfamiliar with disability law, seemed inclined to believe him. That's when Sarah Chun emerged from her house, phone raised, recording everything. "Officers, I'm a witness." "Mr. Oh, Flaro. Mr. Thompson is being harassed illegally. HOA management is destroying federally protected disability equipment. His son is trapped inside the house." The officers hesitated, suddenly realizing they might be in the middle of a civil rights incident. One officer, himself a veteran judging by his demeanor, approached me directly. "Sir, what's happening here?" "Officer, I'm retired Army Ranger Marcus Thompson. These ramps are medical equipment for my disabled son who uses a wheelchair. They're federally protected under the 80. The HOA is illegally destroying them." The officer looked at Dylan in the doorway, at the demolished ramps, at Frank's work order. "Ma'am," he called to Sarah, "you said you're recording this?" "Everything," Sarah confirmed. "The entire illegal demolition, Mr. Thompson's attempts to stop it, and the Haas violation of federal disability law." The officer made his decision. "Everyone stop work immediately. This is a potential civil rights violation. No one touches anything else until this is resolved with federal authorities." Frank looked panicked. "Officer, we have legal authority from the HOA board. I don't care about your HOA." The officer interrupted. "You may be violating the Americans with Disabilities Act. That's federal. This stops now." As the construction crew packed up and left, I installed temporary ramps so Dylan could exit the house. But the damage was done, thousands of dollars in medical equipment destroyed. My son traumatized, and Barbara's declaration of war now impossible to ignore. "Dad, why do they hate us?" Dylan asked that night, as I tucked him into bed. His voice was small, confused, hurt by adult cruelty he couldn't understand. "They don't hate us, buddy," I said, though my words felt hollow. "Some people don't understand what accommodation means. But that doesn't make what they're doing right. Are they going to take our ramps away forever? No. I promised with absolute certainty. We're going to fight this. And we're going to win." because you deserve a home where you can live freely. But what I didn't tell Dylan was that Barbara's illegal demolition had triggered something much bigger than a neighborhood dispute. Federal authorities were now involved, and the HOA president, who thought she was enforcing neighborhood standards, had just committed multiple federal crimes. The next morning, Jennifer Walsh called with news. "Mac, the Department of Justice is joining our lawsuit. Barbara's demolition yesterday was captured on video by multiple neighbors. DOJ is filing for emergency relief and investigating possible criminal civil rights violations. Criminal case for violating community management, for systematic discrimination against disabled individuals under color of HOA authority," Jennifer explained. DOJ investigation revealed Barbara has targeted 7 disabled families in 3 years. "This isn't random HOA overreach, it's organized discrimination," another community elder, Tom Garcia, stopped by that afternoon with information that changed everything. "Mac, you need to see this." He handed me a folder full of documents. Barbara's been running an illegal scheme. The documents revealed Barbara was forcibly evicting disabled families to facilitate a zoning deal. A real estate company was buying properties from families forced to sell, then flipping them to developers building luxury housing at massive profits. "She's profiting from discrimination," Tom explained. "She targets disabled families, makes their lives hell, forces them to sell cheap, then sells to developers. She's made $2.3 million from this scheme in 3 years. The scope was staggering. This wasn't just ruthless HOA enforcement. It was organized fraud built on disability discrimination. Federal investigators would have a field day with this evidence. But Barbara's next move was even more desperate and dangerous. That night, while Dylan slept, I received an anonymous message. "If living conditions are inadequate, military benefits for dependents with disabilities can be revoked. Continue fighting the HOA, and we'll report you're providing inadequate housing for Dylan." The threat was clear. Comply or lose Dylan to Child Protective Services. Barbara was weaponizing government systems against a disabled child to protect her criminal enterprise. I immediately forwarded the message to Jennifer. Her response was swift. "This is witness tampering and misconduct. Save everything." Barbara's criminal history just exponentially increased. That night I sat in Dylan's room, watching my son sleep peacefully, despite the chaos adults had created around him. I made a promise. Barbara Mitchell had declared war on the wrong family. She targeted a disabled child, thinking his father was too weak to fight back. She didn't know I'd taken enemy fire to protect my men. She didn't know I'd spent months in rehabilitation and never gave up. She didn't know my son's smile gave me more strength than any military training. Barbara Mitchell thought she was fighting a desperate veteran family. In fact, she'd declared war on federal disability law. And she was about to discover that some wars you can't win, some enemies you shouldn't make, and some fathers never surrender when their children's homes are under threat. The anonymous threat message triggered immediate federal intervention. Within 24 hours, FBI agents interviewed me about witness tampering. Agent Rebecca Santos was an expert in civil rights crimes. "Mr. Thompson, this message constitutes federal witness intimidation. We're tracing the number and issuing subpoenas for phone records." "How long will that take?" "Primera. Ask it." My only concern was Dylan's safety. "We already know it's Barbara Mitchell's phone," Agent Santos said. "She used her personal cell phone. Amateur mistake. But this gives us probable cause for search warrants. Her home office, HOA records, everything." The next morning, federal agents executed search warrants throughout Lakeside Gardens, Barbara's house, the HOA office, Frank Davis's security station. Neighbors watched in shock as boxes of documents were carried out, computers seized, and files photographed. Sarah called to update me on developments. "Mac, there are 6 federal vehicles at Barbara's house. They're taking everything. Computers, phones, filing cabinets. Frank looks like he's going to pass out." But Barbara's response to the federal raid was pure desperation, wrapped in suburban defiance. That evening she called an emergency HOA meeting, trying to control the situation before things spiraled completely out of control. The community center was packed. Over 200 people came. divided between Barbara's supporters who believed in property values and families who'd suffered discrimination. The tension was at its peak. Barbara opened the meeting with calculated authority, though her hands trembled slightly. "Residents, we face unjust federal harassment because one family refuses to comply with community standards. Mr. Flaro. Mr. Thompson's modifications are federally protected disability accommodations," Attorney Jennifer Walsh interrupted, standing beside me in the back. "And this meeting is being recorded as federal evidence." Barbara's composure cracked slightly. "Senora Walsh, this is a private HOA meeting. You're not welcome. Under the Fair Housing Act, disability discrimination hearings must be open to affected parties," Jennifer countered. "Continue your discussion, Ms. Mitchell. Everything you say is now federal evidence." What happened next was both shocking and revealing. Tom Garcia stood up, his veteran's voice carrying throughout the room. "Barbara, want to talk about Thompson's modifications? Let's talk about the 7 disabled families you forcibly displaced in 3 years." Murmurs rose through the crowd. Barbara's face flushed. "That's complete distortion. Those families chose to move after you bankrupted them," Tom interrupted. "The Williams family with a blind daughter fined $47,000 for guide dog violations. The Martinez family, $38,000 for noise from their autistic son's therapy. All disabled families evicted, while you profited from reselling their homes. This is slander." Barbara's voice rose to a shout. "I have legal authority to enforce HOA covenants. Your legal obligation is to comply with federal disability law," Jennifer said calmly. "A law you've systematically violated for years." The meeting descended into chaos. Families who'd been silent for years began sharing their stories. An elderly couple whose wheelchair ramps were cited as violations, a veteran with PTSD whose service dog was banned, a child with autism whose sensory needs were labeled disturbances. Every story painted the same picture. Barbara was running a racket of disability discrimination under the guise of HOA management, and witnesses in the room were seeing it clearly for the first time. Barbara tried to regain control. "This is ridiculous. Every decision I made was about property values and community standards, not discrimination." Dylan, sitting beside me in his wheelchair, raised his hand. "Senora Mitchell, can I ask a question?" The room fell silent. Everyone turned to look at the 10-year-old who started this crisis with his ramps. Barbara looked like she wanted to refuse, but with hundreds of eyes watching, she had no choice. "Yes, young man," Barbara said through clenched teeth. "If property values are more important than people being able to live in their homes," Dylan asked, with perfect child logic, "doesn't that mean you think houses are more important than people?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. Barbara opened her mouth, closed it, tried again. "Tatese? That's not. You're twisting my words." "I'm just asking," Dylan continued, "because my ramps help me live in my house. If you take them away to protect property values, doesn't that mean you value property more than me?" Several audience members were crying. Tom Garcia stood again. This time others stood with him. "Senora Mitchell, I move for an immediate vote of no confidence in your chairmanship." "You can't do that." Barbara's authority was now completely gone, replaced by panic. "That requires proper notice and procedure. HOA bylaws allow emergency voting for board misconduct," Tom said. He'd clearly done his homework. "Federal investigation constitutes an emergency. I call for an immediate vote." The vote was overwhelming. 187 residents voted to remove Barbara from HOA chairmanship. Only 23 people voted in support, mostly those with financial interests in the real estate projects. Frank Davis abstained, trying to distance himself from the sinking ship. Barbara froze at the podium as results were announced. Her suburban kingdom collapsed in real time. "This vote is invalid," she said weakly. "I'll challenge it through legal channels. Feel free to try." Tom responded, "While you're dealing with federal charges for civil rights violations, witness tampering, and fraud." As the meeting ended, Barbara had to pass Dylan and me on her way out. She stopped for a moment. Mr. Thompson, I hope you're satisfied. You've destroyed this community. Ma'am, I replied quietly, I'm a disabled veteran trying to provide my son with an accessible home. You destroyed yourself by choosing discrimination over humanity. Barbara had no response. She left the community center to an angry crowd, many carrying signs about disability rights. The suburban dictator who'd terrorized families for years now faced mob justice from the very community she claimed to protect. If you've previously experienced HOA discrimination or seen disabled families excluded by communities, leave your story in the comments. These battles need to be fought, and knowing you're not alone helps families stand up to bullies. The federal investigation proceeded at impressive speed. Within 2 weeks, Agent Santos presented me with preliminary findings. Mr. Thompson, Barbara Mitchell's scheme is worse than we thought. She made $4.7 million over 5 years by discriminating against disabled families. How does the scheme work? I asked. Though Tom's documents had outlined the basics, Santos explained. Barbara targets disabled families. She escalates HOA violations and fines until families are financially desperate. The real estate company then offers to buy their homes below market to resolve HOA problems. She sells the properties to developers for massive profits. That's legal fraud, I said. It's a federal civil rights conspiracy. Santos, she's using HOA authority to facilitate real estate fraud based on discrimination. This is RACO territory. Organized crime. The evidence was powerful. Barbara's computers contained spreadsheets tracking problem families, only disabled residents or families with disabled members. Estimated profits from forcing their sales. Timelines of harassment campaigns. Santos said with professional amazement, she documented everything. Most criminals try to hide evidence. Barbara kept detailed records as if she was proud of her efficiency. But the real evidence was an email to real estate partners. Martinez family will collapse within 60 days due to escalating autism violations. Projected 35% profit margin on forced sale. Williams family nearly bankrupt from guide dog penalties. Expect sale offer within 30 days. Reading these cold calculations about vulnerable families made me sick. This wasn't just ruthless HOA enforcement, it was a predator targeting disabled people for profit. Jennifer Walsh filed an expanded federal lawsuit with charges including discrimination, fraud, conspiracy, Fair Housing Act violations, Americans with Disabilities Act violations, witness tampering, and abuse of process. Total penalties could exceed $15 million. But Barbara's legal troubles were just beginning. The Department of Justice announced criminal charges: conspiracy to violate civil rights, wire fraud, witness intimidation, and RICO violations. She faced Aubert, 25 years in federal prison. Frank Davis, seeing the writing on the wall, became a state's witness. His testimony revealed the full scope of Barbara's operation. Frank told federal prosecutors she had a system: identify disabled families, escalate violations, create emergencies, force compliance, or sale. I documented everything per her orders. Agent Santos asked during testimony, "Why did you go along with this?" She paid bonuses. Frank admitted with visible shame. $500 for every family that moved. I made over $15,000 helping her target disabled people. I'm not proud of it. Frank's cooperation provided prosecutors with evidence of systematic conspiracy. Barbara hadn't acted alone. She'd built an organization specifically designed to exploit disabled families. Meanwhile, Dylan's life was slowly returning to normal. We'd rebuilt the ramps better than before, with materials and labor donated by community volunteers. Tom Garcia led the construction, turning it into a neighborhood project. Tom told the assembled volunteers, "This is what community is. We take care of each other, especially our most vulnerable members. This is real property value. Not how houses look, but how we treat the people living in them." Sarah Chun organized a ramp building day where families in Lakeside Gardens learned about disability accessibility. Kids decorated Dylan's new ramps with colorful handprints. It transformed from a symbol of discrimination into a celebration of inclusion. But Barbara wasn't giving up the fight. Through her lawyers, she tried one more desperate gambit, arguing that federal disability law shouldn't override private community choice. Her legal defense argued that HOAs should have the right to maintain certain community characteristics. The underlying argument was that communities should be allowed to exclude disabled individuals. Judge Patricia Hayes, presiding over the federal case, had strong opinions about this theory. At a preliminary hearing, Judge Hayes said, "Ms. Mitchell, you're arguing for the legal right to discriminate against disabled individuals. Do you understand how that sounds?" Barbara's attorney tried to frame it differently. "Your Honor, we're fighting for property rights and community self-governance. By excluding the disabled," Judge Hayes interrupted, "that's not property rights. That's exactly the discrimination federal disability law was designed to prevent. Your client isn't defending community standards. She's defending organized bigotry." The hearing was a complete disaster for Barbara. Every argument her lawyers advanced sounded even worse under federal scrutiny. Property values became code for discrimination. Community standards meant excluding undesirable residents. Aesthetic compliance meant hiding disability. Motion to dismiss denied. Judge Hayes ruled, "This case proceeds to trial." And Senora Mitchell, I strongly suggest you take the government's plea offer seriously, because if this goes to trial, you're looking at decades in federal prison. The government's plea offer was harsh but fair. Admit conspiracy and fraud charges, forfeit all profits from the scheme, pay full restitution to affected families, serve 8 to 10 years in federal prison, and be permanently barred from HOA management roles. Barbara rejected the offer. She genuinely believed she'd done nothing wrong, that enforcing standards justified any harm to disabled families. This hubris would be her downfall. 3 months after the ramp demolition, the criminal trial began. The federal courthouse was packed with victims, media, disability rights advocates, and curious observers. Barbara arrived in expensive designer clothes, maintaining her suburban queen image despite facing federal charges. The prosecution's case was devastating. Financial records showing $4.7 million in profits from discriminatory sales. Emails documenting systematic targeting of disabled families. Frank Davis's testimony about the harassment system, and testimony from 7 families Barbara had destroyed. The Williams family described losing their home while caring for their blind daughter. "We spent $47,000 fighting Barbara's violations because of our daughter's guide dog. Eventually, we had to choose between bankruptcy and selling. Barbara's company bought our home for $180,000 below market value." The Martinez family told a similar story of destruction. "Our autistic son needed in-home therapy. Barbara cited us for noise violations during therapy sessions. She literally tried to fine us for helping our disabled child." Every testimony painted the same picture: systematic, calculated, merciless targeting of vulnerable families for profit. Barbara sat at the defense table with an expressionless face as the human cost of her greed was laid bare. Then came Dylan's testimony. At 10 years old, he was the youngest witness. The judge made special efforts to make him comfortable, but Dylan was determined to speak. "Dylan, can you tell us what happened when the HOA destroyed your ramps?" the prosecutor asked gently. "I got trapped," Dylan said briefly. "I couldn't get out of my house because my ramps were broken. I use a wheelchair, so without ramps, I was stuck. It was really scary." "Did you understand why Ms. Mitchell wanted to remove the ramps?" the prosecutor continued. "She said they were ugly," Dylan replied. "But they're what helps me get home. I don't think it should be called ugly to help me get home." Several jury members were visibly crying. Barbara refused to look at Dylan, staring at the defense table. But the prosecutor wasn't finished. "Dylan, if you could say something to Ms. Mitchell, what would you say?" Dylan turned in his wheelchair to look directly at Barbara. "I would say that people are more important than pretty houses. That disabled kids need homes too. That being different isn't bad. It's just different." The courtroom was silent, except for muffled crying. Barbara finally looked at Dylan and for the first time, her mask cracked. Tears streamed down her face as the human cost of her actions materialized in a brave child. The defense tried to argue Barbara was merely enforcing legitimate HOA rules. Profits were incidental, and there was no intentional discrimination. But the evidence was too strong. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. We, the jury, find the defendant Barbara Mitchell guilty on all charges: conspiracy to violate civil rights, wire fraud, witness intimidation, and RICO violations. Barbara showed no reaction. She knew this was coming but couldn't accept the reality. Sentencing was postponed for 6 weeks. As we left the courthouse, Dylan asked me a question I'll never forget. "Dad, do you think Ms. Mitchell is really sorry? Or is she just sorry she got caught?" The 6 weeks between conviction and sentencing revealed depths to Barbara's operation that shocked even federal investigators. Agent Santos discovered Barbara had been training other HOA presidents in discrimination tactics for a fee. Santos explained at a meeting at my house, she was literally conducting seminars, teaching other HOA boards how to handle problem residents, a euphemism for forcibly evicting disabled families. We've identified 23 HOA communities across 4 states using her methods. The scope was national. Barbara hadn't just terrorized Lakeside Gardens. She'd spread systematic disability discrimination nationwide, creating a network of communities that excluded vulnerable families under the guise of standards enforcement. How many families were affected? I asked. Knowing the answer would be devastating. Preliminary estimate: over 200 families forcibly displaced in the last 3 years. Direct financial losses exceeded $18 million. The emotional trauma is immeasurable. Jennifer Walsh filed class action lawsuits on behalf of affected families nationwide. The legal cases would take years, but the message was clear. Systematic disability discrimination would have both criminal and civil consequences. But something unexpected happened. One of Barbara's former students, Robert Chun, an HOA president from Arizona, contacted Jennifer to provide information. "I want to testify against Barbara. What she taught us was wrong, and I want to make it right." Robert's testimony provided crucial evidence about Barbara's training seminars. She taught us how to identify high-risk residents, people with disabilities, minorities, veterans with PTSD, anyone who might need accommodations. She called it proactive community management. Jennifer asked during testimony, what specific tactics did she teach? Robert explained, start with small violations to document, escalate systematically to create financial pressure. Use emergency enforcement for dramatic effect. Make life hard enough that families choose to leave rather than fight. The calculated structure of Barbara's system was chilling. She'd developed a methodology to destroy families and presented it as HOA best practices. Why did you go along with it? Jennifer asked Robert. She made it sound reasonable, Robert admitted, protecting property values, maintaining community standards. She never explicitly said discriminate against the disabled. But looking back, that's exactly what the system was designed to do. Robert's cooperation created a domino effect. Other HOA presidents who attended Barbara's seminars began coming forward, some seeking immunity, some genuinely The network Barbara built was collapsing as participants realized they were part of a federal civil rights conspiracy. Meanwhile, Dylan was becoming an unexpected voice for disability rights. His testimony, a 10-year-old wheelchair user explaining that accessibility matters more than aesthetics, had gone viral online. He'd been invited to speak at disability rights conferences, featured in news stories, and even consulted by legislators drafting HOA reform bills. Dad, is it weird that Ms. Mitchell being mean made me kinda famous? Dylan asked one evening as we prepared dinner together in our accessible kitchen. Not weird, buddy. Sometimes bad people accidentally create opportunities for good things. Your courage inspired people. That's valuable. But I don't feel brave, Dylan said, with typical child honesty. I was just trying to keep our ramps. That's exactly what bravery is, I replied. Doing what needs to be done even when you're scared. You stood up for yourself, and accidentally stood up for thousands of other kids. The community transformation in Lakeside Gardens was remarkable. Tom Garcia was elected new HOA president on a platform of inclusion and accessibility. His first actions were removing all architectural restrictions on disability accommodations, creating an accessibility fund to help families make modifications, establishing disability awareness programs in the community, building accessible playgrounds and common areas. Tom said in his first board meeting announcement, "We're proving that accessibility and community beauty aren't opposites. They're partners. A beautiful community includes everyone." The accessible playground became the symbol of the new Lakeside Gardens, built with community volunteers. The playground featured wheelchair-accessible equipment, sensory-friendly areas, and designs for children of different abilities. Dylan helped design it, ensuring it worked for real disabled kids, not just theoretical ones. Over 300 people attended the playground's opening ceremony. Children of all ability levels played together. Parents who'd been afraid to talk about their children's needs found community support. The transformation from Barbara's exclusionary vision was complete. But Barbara continued to fight. In her pre-sentencing interviews with probation officers, she showed not the slightest hint of remorse. "I was protecting property values and community standards. If people couldn't meet those standards, they should have lived elsewhere." The probation report recommended maximum sentencing. Defendant shows no genuine remorse, continues to justify discriminatory actions, and presents ongoing risk of similar behavior. Maximum sentencing recommended to protect vulnerable communities. Sentencing day arrived with a packed courthouse, just like the trial. But this time, not just victims, but advocates, disability rights organizations, civil rights groups, and former HOA presidents who'd learned from Barbara's downfall. Judge Hayes began by addressing Barbara directly. "Senora Mitchell, I've reviewed your case comprehensively. Your crimes aren't just legal violations, but moral failings. You targeted the most vulnerable members of society for profit." "Your Honor, I object to that characterization," Barbara's attorney began. "Counsel, your client systematically destroyed families with disabled children." Judge Hayes interrupted. "She documented targeting vulnerable people. She trained others to replicate her discrimination. This isn't interpretation. It's proven fact from your client's own records." Judge Hayes turned to Barbara. "Your HOA position gave you power. You could have used that power to build inclusive communities. Instead, you weaponized it against people who needed compliance and compassion." The judge paused, letting the weight settle. "The prosecution recommends 15 to 20 years. The defense requests 5 years with home confinement. I've evaluated both positions and the probation report. Senora Mitchell, I sentence you to 18 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years supervised release. You'll forfeit all profits from your criminal enterprise, approximately $4.7 million. You're permanently banned from any HOA management positions. You'll pay full restitution to all affected families." 18 years. Barbara would be 68 when released, her suburban kingdom replaced by a prison cell. The transformation was absolute, but Judge Hayes wasn't finished. "Senora Mitchell, I'm also mandating disability sensitivity training during your incarceration. Not because I believe you'll change. Your lack of remorse suggests otherwise, but because even in prison, you'll need to understand that disabled people have rights. You must respect." Federal marshals led Barbara away, passing Dylan and me. For a moment, our eyes met. I expected defiance or hate, but instead, I saw something unexpected. Exhaustion, and perhaps the first glimmer of understanding what she'd truly lost. Dylan did something that shocked everyone. He wheeled toward Barbara. "Senora Mitchell, I forgive you." Barbara stopped. Marshals waited for the moment. "You..." "What?" "I forgive you," Dylan repeated. "Not because you deserve it, because I don't want to stay angry forever. Anger takes energy, and I need my energy to be happy." Tears streamed down Barbara's face. I don't understand why you'd forgive me. After everything I did. Because, Dylan said with the wisdom of a perfect 10-year-old, hurt people, hurt other people, and I want the hurting to stop. So I choose to forgive you. That doesn't mean what you did was right. It just means I'm done being angry about it. Those moments were captured by dozens of cameras. Dylan's forgiveness became as famous as his testimony. A child victim choosing grace over revenge, displaying moral courage that shamed adults who couldn't show similar compassion. If Dylan's forgiveness moved you, leave a heart in the comments. His courage shows that healing isn't about revenge. It's about choosing not to let persecution control your future. Share this if you believe in second chances and the power of forgiveness. Barbara was led away, sobbing to begin her 18-year sentenza. But something had shifted in her expression. The hard defensive posture cracked, revealing the human beneath the monster she'd become. 3 months after sentencing, I received an unexpected letter from Barbara in federal prison. Mr. Thompson and Dylan. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but Dylan gave it anyway. His grace broke something in me that 80 years of wall building had created. I'm writing not to ask you for anything, but to tell you I finally understand what I was. I destroyed families and convinced myself I was protecting property values. I targeted vulnerable children and called it community standards. I built an empire on cruelty and called it success. I'm taking university courses in social work and disability studies. I'm learning about the people I harmed. I understand what accessibility means and why it matters. I can't undo the damage I caused, but I can spend my remaining years ensuring I never forget the human cost of my cruelty. Dylan's forgiveness gave me something I didn't know. I needed hope that someone as broken as me might still have capacity to be better. Thank you for teaching me about grace. Barbara Mitchell. I showed Dylan the letter. What do you think, buddy? Is she really changing? I don't know, Dylan said thoughtfully, but trying to change is good, even if you're not sure you can. Maybe prison will help her figure out how to be better. The civil lawsuits proceeded swiftly. Barbara's criminal conviction made the civil cases easy. She'd been found guilty of systematic discrimination. Legal liability automatically followed. The class action settlement totaled $18.3 million, distributed among 217 affected families. My family received $340,000 in compensation for destroyed ramps, emotional distress, and punitive damages. But more valuable than the money were the systemic changes that followed. Congress passed the HOA Accountability and Fair Housing Act, establishing federal oversight of HOA disability, compliance, mandatory accessibility protections, heavy penalties for discrimination, whistleblower protections for reporting violations, requirements for disabled representation on HOA boards. The law was nicknamed Dylan's Law after the young wheelchair user whose courage exposed nationwide discrimination. Dylan attended the signing ceremony at the White House, met the president, and gave a brief speech about why accessibility matters. Dylan told the press, "Every kid deserves a home they can enter. Being disabled doesn't make you less of a person. It just means you need different things. Communities should include everyone, not just the easy people." The media appearances, laws, settlement money, none of it changed our daily reality much. We still lived in Lakeside Gardens, now a genuinely inclusive community. Dylan still went to school, did homework, played with friends. The ramps were just ramps, not political statements. But the ripple effects were nationwide. HOA communities across America began implementing accessibility reforms, not from kindness, but from fear of federal prosecution. Disabled families who'd suffered silently found legal recourse. The culture of exclusion was being dismantled, case by case, community by community. Tom Garcia organized an annual Accessibility Awareness Day in Lakeside Gardens featuring disability simulation exercises, accessibility demonstrations, and family testimonials about why inclusion matters. Barbara's legacy of discrimination was actively replaced by a culture of compliance. Sada Chun founded a nonprofit called the Accessible Neighborhoods Project to help families navigate HOA disputes and learn their rights. Funded by settlement money and donations, the project provided free legal assistance to disabled families facing discrimination. Sarah explained in an interview, Barbara's persecution accidentally created an infrastructure to fight the discrimination she knew. Victims became advocates. Exposed tactics became warning signs. Her downfall became a roadmap for justice. 5 years after Barbara's conviction, the transformation was complete. Lakeside Gardens had become a model, inclusive community, featured in urban planning studies and disability rights publications. Property values had increased 23%. Apparently, accessibility doesn't hurt property values. It enhances them. Dylan, now 15, was thriving. His advocacy work had built his confidence tremendously. He'd become a voice for disabled youth, giving talks at schools about inclusion and accessibility. The shy 10-year-old targeted by Barbara had transformed into a powerful advocate. "Dad, you know what's weird?" Dylan said one evening. "If Senora Mitchell hadn't been so mean to us, I wouldn't have learned I could stand up for myself. Her been bad accident taught me I was strong." "That's not giving her credit," I explained. "You were always strong. She just created circumstances that required you to show it." Meanwhile, Barbara was in year 3 of her 18-year sentence. According to prison records, she'd completed multiple courses in social work, disability rights, and conflict resolution. She'd even begun teaching other inmates about accessibility and inclusion. Was it genuine change or performative redemption? Honestly, I didn't know. But as the systems we built continued protecting families independent of Barbara's personal transformation, the question mattered less. Dylan told the reporter asking about Barbara, "I don't need her to change to heal. I forgave her for myself, not for her. Whether she gets better is her choice. I'm just going to keep being myself." The reporter's final question stuck with me. "What would you say to other families facing HOA discrimination?" Dylan's answer was perfect. Don't give up. Bullies want you to think you're alone and weak. But you're not alone. Lots of people care about justice. And you're not weak. Knowing you deserve respect is power. Fight back. We did. And we won. The 6 weeks between conviction and sentencing revealed depths to Barbara's operation that shocked even federal investigators. Agent Santos discovered Barbara had been training other HOA presidents in discrimination tactics for a fee. Santos explained at a meeting at my house, she was literally conducting seminars, teaching other HOA boards how to handle problem residents, a euphemism for forcibly evicting disabled families. We've identified 23 HOA communities across 4 states using her methods. The scope was national. Barbara hadn't just terrorized Lakeside Gardens, she'd spread systematic disability discrimination nationwide, creating a network of communities that excluded vulnerable families under the guise of standards enforcement. How many families were affected? I asked. Knowing the answer would be devastating. Preliminary estimate, over 200 families forcibly displaced in the last 3 years. Direct financial losses exceeded $18 million. The emotional trauma is immeasurable. Jennifer Walsh filed class action lawsuits on behalf of affected families nationwide. The legal cases would take years, but the message was clear. Systematic disability discrimination would have both criminal and civil consequences. But something unexpected happened. One of Barbara's former students, Robert Chun, an HOA president from Arizona, contacted Jennifer to provide information. "I want to testify against Barbara. What she taught us was wrong, and I want to make it right." Robert's testimony provided crucial evidence about Barbara's training seminars. She taught us how to identify high-risk residents, people with disabilities, minorities, veterans with PTSD, anyone who might need accommodations. She called it proactive community management. Jennifer asked during testimony, what specific tactics did she teach? Robert explained, start with small violations to document, escalate systematically to create financial pressure. Use emergency enforcement for dramatic effect. Make life hard enough that families choose to leave rather than fight. The calculated structure of Barbara's system was chilling. She'd developed a methodology to destroy families and presented it as HOA best practices. "Why did you go along with it?" Jennifer asked Robert. "She made it sound reasonable," Robert admitted. "Protecting property values, maintaining community standards. She never explicitly said discriminate against the disabled. But looking back, that's exactly what the system was designed to do." Robert's cooperation created a domino effect. Other HOA presidents who attended Barbara's seminars began coming forward, some seeking immunity, some genuinely The network Barbara built was collapsing as participants realized they were part of a federal civil rights conspiracy. Meanwhile, Dylan was becoming an unexpected voice for disability rights. His testimony, a 10-year-old wheelchair user explaining that accessibility matters more than aesthetics, had gone viral online. He'd been invited to speak at disability rights conferences, featured in news stories, and even consulted by legislators drafting HOA reform bills. "Dad, is it weird that Ms. Mitchell being mean made me kind of famous?" Dylan asked one evening as we prepared dinner together in our accessible kitchen. "Not weird, buddy. Sometimes bad people accidentally create opportunities for good things. Your courage inspired people. That's valuable. But I don't feel brave," Dylan said, with typical child honesty. "I was just trying to keep our ramps." "That's exactly what bravery is," I replied. "Doing what needs to be done even when you're scared." You stood up for yourself and accidentally stood up for thousands of other kids. The community transformation in Lakeside Gardens was remarkable. Tom Garcia was elected new HOA president on a platform of inclusion and accessibility. His first actions were removing all architectural restrictions on disability accommodations, creating an accessibility fund to help families make modifications, establishing disability awareness programs in the community, building accessible playgrounds and common areas. Tom said in his first board meeting announcement, "We're proving that accessibility and community beauty aren't opposites. They're partners. A beautiful community includes everyone." The accessible playground became the symbol of the new Lakeside Gardens, built with community volunteers. The playground featured wheelchair-accessible equipment, sensory-friendly areas, and designs for children of different abilities. Dylan helped design it, ensuring it worked for real disabled kids, not just theoretical ones. Over 300 people attended the playground's opening ceremony. Children of all ability levels played together. Parents who'd been afraid to talk about their children's needs found community support. The transformation from Barbara's exclusionary vision was complete. But Barbara continued to fight. In her pre-sentencing interviews with probation officers, she showed not the slightest hint of remorse. "I was protecting property values and community standards. If people couldn't meet those standards, they should have lived elsewhere." The probation report recommended maximum sentencing. Defendant shows no genuine remorse, continues to justify discriminatory actions, and presents ongoing risk of similar behavior. Maximum sentencing recommended to protect vulnerable communities. Sentencing day arrived with a packed courthouse, just like the trial. But this time, not just victims, but advocates, disability rights organizations, civil rights groups, and former HOA presidents who'd learned from Barbara's downfall. Judge Hayes began by addressing Barbara directly. "Señora Mitchell, I've reviewed your case comprehensively. Your crimes aren't just legal violations, but moral failings. You targeted the most vulnerable members of society for profit." "Your Honor, I object to that characterization," Barbara's attorney began. "Counsel, your client systematically destroyed families with disabled children." Judge Hayes interrupted. "She documented targeting vulnerable people. She trained others to replicate her discrimination. This isn't interpretation. It's proven fact from your client's own records." Judge Hayes turned to Barbara. "Your HOA position gave you power. You could have used that power to build inclusive communities. Instead, you weaponized it against people who needed compliance and compassion." The judge paused, letting the weight settle. "The prosecution recommends 15 to 20 years. The defense requests 5 years with home confinement. I've evaluated both positions and the probation report. Senora Mitchell, I sentence you to 18 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years supervised release. You'll forfeit all profits from your criminal enterprise, approximately $4.7 million. You're permanently banned from any HOA management positions. You'll pay full restitution to all affected families. 18 years. Barbara would be 68 when released, her suburban kingdom replaced by a prison cell. The transformation was absolute, but Judge Hayes wasn't finished. Senora Mitchell, I'm also mandating disability sensitivity training during your incarceration. Not because I believe you'll change. Your lack of remorse suggests otherwise, but because even in prison, you'll need to understand that disabled people have rights. You must respect. Federal marshals led Barbara away, passing Dylan and me. For a moment, our eyes met. I expected defiance or hate, but instead, I saw something unexpected. Exhaustion, and perhaps the first glimmer of understanding what she'd truly lost. Dylan did something that shocked everyone. He wheeled toward Barbara. Senora Mitchell, I forgive you. Barbara stopped. Marshals waited for the moment. You. What? I forgive you, Dylan repeated. Not because you deserve it, because I don't want to stay angry forever. Anger takes energy, and I need my energy to be happy. Tears streamed down Barbara's face. I don't understand why you'd forgive me, after everything I did. Because, Dylan said with the wisdom of a perfect 10-year-old, hurt people, hurt other people, and I want the hurting to stop. So I choose to forgive you. That doesn't mean what you did was right. It just means I'm done being angry about it. Those moments were captured by dozens of cameras. Dylan's forgiveness became as famous as his testimony, a child victim choosing grace over revenge, displaying moral courage that shamed adults who couldn't show similar compassion. If Dylan's forgiveness moved you, leave a heart in the comments. His courage shows that healing isn't about revenge. It's about choosing not to let persecution control your future. Share this if you believe in second chances and the power of forgiveness. Barbara was led away, sobbing to begin her 18-year sentence. But something had shifted in her expression. The hard defensive posture cracked, revealing the human beneath the monster she'd become. 3 months after sentencing, I received an unexpected letter from Barbara in federal prison. Mr. Thompson and Dylan. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but Dylan gave it anyway. His grace broke something in me that 18 years of wall building had created. I'm writing not to ask you for anything, but to tell you I finally understand what I was. I destroyed families and convinced myself I was protecting property values. I targeted vulnerable children and called it community standards. I built an empire on cruelty and called it success. I'm taking university courses in social work and disability studies. I'm learning about the people I harmed. I understand what accessibility means and why it matters. I can't undo the damage I caused, but I can spend my remaining years ensuring I never forget the human cost of my cruelty. Dylan's forgiveness gave me something I didn't know. I needed hope that someone as broken as me might still have capacity to be better. Thank you for teaching me about grace. Barbara Mitchell. I showed Dylan the letter. What do you think, buddy? Is she really changing? I don't know, Dylan said thoughtfully, but trying to change is good, even if you're not sure you can. Maybe prison will help her figure out how to be better. The civil lawsuits proceeded swiftly. Barbara's criminal conviction made the civil cases easy. She'd been found guilty of systematic discrimination. Legal liability automatically followed. The class action settlement totaled $18.3 million, distributed among 217 affected families. My family received $340,000 in compensation for destroyed ramps, emotional distress, and punitive damages. But more valuable than the money were the systemic changes that followed. Congress passed the HOA Accountability and Fair Housing Act, establishing federal oversight of HOA disability, compliance, mandatory accessibility protections, heavy penalties for discrimination, whistleblower protections for reporting violations, requirements for disabled representation on HOA boards. The law was nicknamed Dillon's Law after the young wheelchair user whose courage exposed nationwide discrimination. Dillon attended the signing ceremony at the White House, met the president, and gave a brief speech about why accessibility matters. Dillon told the press, "Every kid deserves a home they can enter. Being disabled doesn't make you less of a person. It just means you need different things. Communities should include everyone, not just the easy people." The media appearances, laws, settlement money, none of it changed our daily reality much. We still lived in Lakeside Gardens. Now a genuinely inclusive community. Dillon still went to school, did homework, played with friends. The ramps were just ramps, not political statements, but the ripple effects were nationwide. HOA communities across America began implementing accessibility reforms, not from kindness, but from fear of federal prosecution. Disabled families who'd suffered silently found legal recourse. The culture of exclusion was being dismantled, case by case, community by community. Tom Garcia organized an annual Accessibility Awareness Day in Lakeside Gardens featuring disability simulation exercises, accessibility demonstrations, and family testimonials about why inclusion matters. Barbara's legacy of discrimination was actively replaced by a culture of compliance. Sada Chun founded a nonprofit called the Accessible Neighborhoods Project to help families navigate HOA disputes and learn their rights. Funded by settlement money and donations, the project provided free legal assistance to disabled families facing discrimination. Sarah explained in an interview, Barbara's persecution accidentally created an infrastructure to fight the discrimination she knew. Victims became advocates. Exposed tactics became warning signs. Her downfall became a roadmap for justice. 5 years after Barbara's conviction, the transformation was complete. Lakeside Gardens had become a model inclusive community, featured in urban planning studies and disability rights publications. Property values had increased 23%. Apparently, accessibility doesn't hurt property values, it enhances them. Dillon, now 15, was thriving. His advocacy work had built his confidence tremendously. He'd become a voice for disabled youth, giving talks at schools about inclusion and accessibility. The shy 10-year-old targeted by Barbara had transformed into a powerful advocate. "Dad, you know what's weird?" Dillon said one evening. "If Senora Mitchell hadn't been so mean to us, I wouldn't have learned I could stand up for myself. Her been bad accident taught me I was strong." "That's not giving her credit," I explained. "You were always strong. She just created circumstances that required you to show it." Meanwhile, Barbara was in year 3 of her 18-year sentence. According to prison records, she'd completed multiple courses in social work, disability rights, and conflict resolution. She'd even begun teaching other inmates about accessibility and inclusion. Was it genuine change or performative redemption? Honestly, I didn't know. But as the systems we built continued protecting families independent of Barbara's personal transformation, the question mattered less. Dillon told the reporter asking about Barbara, "I don't need her to change to heal. I forgave her for myself, not for her. Whether she gets better is her choice. I'm just going to keep being myself." The reporter's final question stuck with me. What would you say to other families facing HOA discrimination? Dillon's answer was perfect. Don't give up. Bullies want you to think you're alone and weak. But you're not alone. Lots of people care about justice. And you're not weak. Knowing you deserve respect is power. Fight back. We did. And we won.